Alrighty, everybody, if it's your first time here with us today, welcome, and if you've been here before, welcome back to a new edition of Game of the Week from Chess for Charity here in Jacksonville, Florida. This past weekend on August the 21st, some exciting action being brought out of the Pablo Creek Library, and lots of games were submitted this week, so make sure you keep turning your submissions in. Very exciting to look through them all. The one we picked, I think, is an especially fun game to look at. If it's not your game this week, make sure to keep giving them our way. Can't wait to keep seeing all of the great submissions in the weeks ahead. But this week, we're looking at a game played between Joseph Cagle, starring with the white pieces, off against James Stoutamire with the black pieces. This was from round one of our action event. Action event meaning game was in 25 minutes, delay of 5, so fairly quick time controls does count for that dual rating, but not tons of time on the clock. And in this game, we're going to see some real fun throwdown fighting happening here, and let's go ahead, dive into the action, and see just what we have on tap. So, Joseph Cagle started things off with e4, always an exciting opening that way, and we saw c6 for a Caracon from James. d4 was played, occupying the center of the board, and black, of course, strikes right back at that center with d5, always the main point in the Caro, trying to fight for that stake of the center, and hoping to, if white trades this pawn, the whole idea is that, well, black's going to get that extra central pawn in the center, so black would love it if white would take this pawn and say, hey, I get my two central pawns, right? White develops with knight to c3, very nice and principled move, and d takes e4, knight takes e4 was played. And we followed a lot of the main lines here in the Caracon. James decided to play bishop f5, immediately attacking the knight and bringing the bishop out before playing e6. Knight g3, retreating the knight and attacking the bishop, and bishop to g6. And now we got the most popular main line of the Caro from Joseph in this game with the move h4. And h4 is a move which seeks to immediately say, hey, your bishop is out here and I'm going to threaten it. I'm going to make an immediate threat to that bishop and see what you're going to do about it, and I'm going to get active, give some space for my pieces. Maybe my knight will even come to h3, or I could get in a rook lift down the line at some point because of this extra space that I've got. Now, here the normal line for black is to play with the move h6, after which white gets all of the space here with h5, pushing the bishop back, and then often we'll play bishop to d3 next after a move like knight to f3. However, in this game, rather than h6, making space for his bishop to drop back, James played a little bit of a sideline, a much less popular line with the move h5. And the reason this is less popular is that the move h5, yes, it stops white from expanding and getting space, but it's not as sturdy of a structure for black. The problem is this h5 pawn is equally weak for black as it is for white now, so both sides have the same targets over there down the line, potentially in the long term. And this bishop is a little bit looser because now it can't really drop to h7, or else the h5 pawn will be hanging. So if the bishop retreats, then white can take on h5, and this allows white to threaten the bishop. If, for example, white were to have a knight on f4, if he played like knight h3 to f4, the bishop can't really retreat in an effective manner, so white has the chance to take on g6 and maybe double the pawns in some lines. So h5 is a little bit awkward. It gives white some more flexibility. Knight f3 was the move played from Joseph, and James played knight to d7, developing his knight on the queen side. Bishop comes to d3, a very common idea in these positions, allowing for black to trade off the bishops, but the point is that white doesn't have really a good place to make this bishop any better. If he develops it to c4, e6 makes this bishop bite on granite on the f6, f7, and e6 pawns. Not a good life for it there. If the bishop comes to e2, it stays on the board, but is much more passive than its black's counterpart. So even though black's structure is going to be more on the light squares where maybe his bishop is the bad one, quote unquote, white is okay trading off the light squared bishops in these positions typically. Bishop takes d3, queen takes d3 is played. And part of the reason white is okay doing this is if we look at the position now, black has not done a whole lot to develop. Of course, it's black to move here, but white has already brought both of his knights out. He has his queen on a d3 square, which, yes, you don't necessarily want to bring your queen out early, but if you bring it out to a square where it can't get kicked around, that's perfectly fine. It will help you down the line. So white has developed 3 pieces. He has more of a stake in the center with his d4 pawn. Things look very nice. It's a nice, comfortable position. Black is banking on the soundness of his position, and typically in the Cagle, this pawn would be on h6 instead of h5, so it's maybe a little bit less sound than it normally would be. Normally these pawns would both be a square up, which, while more cramped, is a little bit more structurally secure. Anyway, we get the move e6 from James, and Joseph continues with his development plan, bringing his pieces into the game, bishop to d2. Bishop d2 is a flexible way of developing the bishop. You could consider bringing it to f4 to prevent a move like bishop d6, but what bishop d2 does is it allows white to immediately castle queenside or kingside. It's all up to white in this position, and also gives him the potential of bringing this bishop to c3 and putting pressure on the long diagonal in this manner. And here I think a move like bishop d6 would be the most natural from James, putting some pressure on g3. Instead, he developed his other knight here with knight g to f6. Joseph castled to the queen side, and we reached a big position here early in the game. Once again, most natural appears to be the move bishop d6 for black, simply developing, putting some pressure on the knight on g3. I think this is what James probably should have done in order to continue in the most natural manner here, even though white's position is starting to come to life a little bit. Anytime that your king is still in the center, you got to be wary of the board opening up, of tactics starting to loom in the position. And here, James made a freeing move, a move which seeks to generate counterplay, but which is just a little bit premature here. It's not quite timed accurately. That's the move c5. What is black's idea with c5? Well, he's undermining white's central point here on d4 and looking to bring his knight and his bishop to life. If you take this pawn, he can develop his bishop in time with a recapture. And that's what black would like. He'd like to free up the space a little bit. But what are some of the downsides of this move? Well, for one, the opening of the d-file. Right now, white's rook is lined up with black's queen, so potentially there are some tactics that could fall in line there. And also, in general, when you are less developed than the other side, it's not a good idea to start opening up the position, to start trying to seek this counterplay just yet. You want to make sure you get your pieces out and your king safe. And here we see Joseph simply prepare a little bit. His next move here, rook he1. A quiet-looking move, but suddenly you see white has all his pieces where they kind of want to be. This bishop on d2 isn't the most ideal, but the knights have developed, the queen is out, the rooks are centrally placed, everything is lined up in the middle of the board, and so are black's king and queen still in the middle of the board, so this spells some trouble looming in the position. James needs to be very, very careful here because white has some big threats looming. And unfortunately, James did not quite catch what Joseph's idea was in the position. So, what happens in the game? What uncorks the bundle of fun we're about to see? Well, one thing after rook h to e1 is this f2 pawn looks kind of juicy, right? If black could play knight takes f2, he'd be forking the queen and the rook, and that looks pretty nice to me. White has already pushed this pawn to h4, so he can't contest g4. And James played the move knight to g4, putting his knight on the outpost, which is usually a good strategic idea, but here it's too soon, tactically failing. It looks like it's aggressive, it looks like it's attacking f2. Should white worry about this capture, though? No, white has another plan in mind, and this is a great moment to pause your video, see if you can figure out the big breakthrough blow, exclamation mark move that Joseph comes up with here in order to punch through the position. So in this position, what do we see? Rook takes e6, sacrificing a full rook, but oh no, White's pieces are going to obliterate the king's defenses. This knight, which was serving as a defensive piece, is now suddenly sort of away from the king on g4. Neither of the rooks are in a position to help, so White is going to get free rein to bring his knights toward the king, bring the bishop in, bring the rook in. Everything's going to be flooding toward this king very quickly. After f takes e6, of course, black is up a rook, so white has to act quickly. This is either kill or be killed time, right? You've got to go all the way in. You've got to deal a finishing blow. There's no in-between at this point. You're either going to get the other guy's king or you're going to be down big time. But how does white keep that initiative? Queen to g6, an immediate check, and this f7 square, there's nothing that can step in the middle there. No way of blocking this check with the queen, so the king has to come to e7, which is a very ugly looking square for the king. Now, still, you may be looking at this position and thinking to yourself, well, where is white's finishing blow? We've sacrificed a rook, we're attacking the king, but there's nothing hanging just yet. I'm not winning a rook. I'm not winning my opponent's queen. I could play bishop to g5, but then he can always bring his knight back to f6. So how do we find a way through here? Where's the win? Is this working for white, or is he just being stopped? Another very nice move here. How can we continue to open up lines toward that enemy king, to rip apart the defenses? See if you can find the next move. Well, is one sacrifice enough in this position? No, we're going to do it again. A knight to f5 check. And look at this. The queen is covering the escape squares over here. The knight is putting the king in check as well as covering the d6 square. And this makes black forced to recapture the knight. And white has given up not only a rook, but a rook and a knight now. We've given up two pieces. We are all in at this point. Have to find a finishing breakthrough. But of course, where is this king going? This queen is eyeing all the space around him. All we need to do is push a little bit more. Just push black over the brink, and soon the position will fall to pieces. How do we do that? Rook e1, of course, opening up the rook onto the e-file, bringing in another piece. Nowhere for the king to run and hide, so black has to interpose with a knight. James put his d knight onto the e5 square, starting to try to create a little space for his king. Maybe he can run away here off to the queen side and find safety. Of course, we can give up a knight. We can give up two knights to defend. Remember, we're up a rook and a knight already, so it's okay to give back some material if we can just escape this attack. Well, white's not letting you go anywhere. Knight takes e5, played from Joseph, and the point is we're keeping this file open. The knight is flexible. If we take with the pawn, then we're not going to be able to move that pawn away and open up the lines again. So by taking with the knight, we keep the ability of the rook to give discovered check, and we also cover the d7 square, so nowhere for this king to run just yet in the position. Black is running out of moves. Here James played the move knight takes e5. Of course, this knight is no longer doing much defensively on g4 if you don't trade it, so you might as well give it up, was his thinking here. But after rook takes e5, only one place left to run. King coming over to d7, and we're starting to see the chase is on. That king is heading for the hills. He's up and off to the races. But again, white has to find a way to finish the job, because if we don't, we are a rook down. So what do we play next? Rook to d5 check. And already now we're threatening to win back material, because of course, once that king moves, we're attacking the queen, and you can't bring the bishop into the middle, because we can just take it again with either the queen or the rook. That won't be doing you any good at all. So king to c8 is played from James, running away. And should we cash in this position? Should we play rook takes d8? Is that the best way to go about it? Well, of course, rook takes d8 is still going to leave us with an attack, But no, we want mate. We don't want to cash in just yet. We don't want to cash out and say, hey, we're done for the day. Let's take this queen. We've still got the attack. So queen to e6, keeping the pedal to the metal, forcing black to respond, because where are you going? You can't block with the queen. If you move the king into the corner, then the rook can take the queen for free with check, and this just looks terrible. King to c7 is played, and the storm clouds are brewing. It's almost the finishing blow. How can we wrap things up? Well, there's only 3 pieces left on the board for white, but let's use them all to attack. Bishop f4 check, and oh no, there's nothing left here to stop black from being destroyed on the d file. And with all these open squares, the king has nowhere to run. Bishop d6 is forced, but of course, we're attacking 3 times. Black is defending twice. We're going to be winning pieces here. Bishop takes d6 with check. And here, black decided to capture with the queen. If black plays a move like king to c6 or b6, of course, we can always move the bishop with discovered check, or we can take on c5 with the rook. Mate will come very quickly in these lines. Black decided to play queen takes d6, and now, after queen takes d6, only one move for the king, king to c8, and how does white finish off the game? Mate in 1, rook takes c5, checkmate. What a game, a very crazy, fun attacking game, sacrificing a rook, sacrificing a knight, busting open the center, and a very nice miniature created as a result of that. A fun, exciting attacking game in the game of the week this past weekend. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Make sure to keep coming out on Wednesdays. We have lessons at 4:30, followed by free chess at the Southeast Regional Library. Saturday is out at Pablo Creek. Come on out for some rated play, alternating between these quick tournaments, Game 25, as well as Blitz games, and at the end of the month, also doing some Game 45 as well. So make sure to come on out and submit your games so that you can be featured as well in Jacksonville Chess for Charity's Game of the Week. Best of luck. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, post any comments, and share via the buttons below. Check out our website at chesswithnick.com for further video, more content, and any postings on lessons, further video analysis, or written analysis that you may be interested in. And be sure to check out our YouTube channel, Chess with Nick, on youtube.com. Have a great day, and wishing you best of luck.